Some ghost ships are found drifting at sea without their crew. Other ghost ships re-emerge from their watery graves and haunt the waters of their demise for years to come. And so it is that the HMS Eurydice continues to appear around the British shoreline to this day, since it sank way back in 1878. So today, we're going to unpack the disaster of this fine vessel and investigate the alleged sightings of the Phantom crew to see if we can lay the mystery and her crew to rest. Get under the covers and lock the doors. This is the story of the HMS Eurydice. Built in 1842 and launched a year later, the three-mast, 921-ton, 26-gun frigate was, at the time, the peak of naval engineering, and venerated by the British Royal Navy as one of their finest ships. However, that prestige would not last forever. After an esteemed life of service in the North American and West Indies station, she would see no service for at least 20 years. That long time spent stationary garnered a reputation for the ship, who now was seen as on the way out, a relic of the past. In fact, iron warships were on the horizon, so to speak. As far as wooden boats were concerned, the writing was on the wall. This slow demise may well have contributed to the status as a ghost ship, for as often as phantoms emerge from great tragedy, so too do ghosts appear after a lifetime of slights and backhands. Then, much later, the HMS Eurydice would be converted into a training vessel, the ultimate insult for a once mighty boat. Though she would travel the seas once more, the question has since been asked whether this demotion was the final humiliation that engaged the ship's soul. Following a tour of Bermuda, an area with its own reputation of strange happenings, she began her homeward journey to Portsmouth on the 24th of March, 1878. Now, comparatively, this part of the English Channel was far calmer than the open waters she had sailed on before. But just as she had cleared the Atlantic in good time, and with the safety of British shores within sight, the boat was caught in a heavy snowstorm. Seemingly out of nowhere, a thick and powerful blizzard descended. The 300-plus naval recruits on board fought hard against Mother Nature to keep the ship afloat, but the snowstorm had caught them so unaware that within 10 minutes, the vessel had turned and was taking on tremendous amounts of water through open ports. There was nothing they could do. The tragedy was witnessed by a young Winston Churchill who had been visiting the Isle of Wight with his nurse. He claims to have witnessed the capsizing from a cliffside. But he wasn't the only one to see the final moments of the HMS Eurydice. A small schooner named Emma managed to pick up just 4 survivors, though 2 would later die in hospital. As for the rest of the crew, many of whom were strong swimmers, they simply could not fend against the freezing water and heavy snowfall. All people could do was watch as hundreds of men froze to death. But as thick as the blizzard was, the sign that the sailors had died would be when their screams for help turned to silence. Almost as suddenly as the blizzard had arrived, did it dissipate, and where the horizon held the view of a graceful ship, there was now nothing but calm water. Soon, bodies washed ashore, but were impossible to identify, making respectful and peaceful burials difficult. As we all know, ghosts are spurned to haunt others when they have unfinished business, such as not being laid to rest. 364 people died that day, making it the largest peacetime tragedy in British naval history. But it was also a firm recognition that the days of the traditional man of war were over. The demise of the HMS Eurydice was more than the end of this ship, it was the end of an entire era. Subsequent investigations found that the captain and crew were blameless, with many pointing to the ship's radical design as a cause for concern. Indeed, it had been built with a shallow draft for the purposes of navigating shallow waters, so there had been questions of the ship's stability for some time. These, however, were swatted away because of the likelihood of rough weather conditions during her voyages. In fact, she had successfully traveled far and wide, so many discounted the chance of sinking. But that just made the sudden appearance of a blistering storm all the more eerie. Britain is hardly known for its fierce winters, with snow seldom forming on land. Perhaps out of national sense of loss for the many men who suffered that day, some considered the turning of the weather an intervention from nefarious forces beyond our comprehension. In a stranger turn of events, the Eurydice's replacement, the HMS Juno, later renamed the HMS Atalanta, disappeared at sea in 1880. She had 281 lives on board but was never seen again, and no shipwreck was ever discovered, nor any bodies dragged from the waters. A storm was considered the most likely explanation, but we'll never know if the appearance of bad sailing conditions was as suspiciously sudden as the blizzard which claimed the Atalanta's predecessor. The ghost story of the Eurydice gathered steam because of this, with claims that the unidentifiable seamen had come for revenge or sacrifice with those elected to replace them. In fact, claims of ghost ship sightings began on the very day of the Eurydice disaster. That very afternoon, the Bishop of Ripon and Sir John McNeill, the Scottish diplomat, were having dinner in Windsor some 70 miles away. Suddenly, McNeill exclaimed, "Why don't they close the portholes and reef the sails?" This bizarre outburst was apparently due to a vision that overcame him. McNeill said he saw a boat sailing through the channel towards a storm with her gun ports open. Given the time frame and distance, it would not have been possible for McNeill to have witnessed the boat or received word of the disaster. Yet, the boat did indeed take on water through the open gun ports, and the failure to reef her sails contributed to her turning. There were more sightings over the following decades, too. And so the story of a ship haunting a cape on the Isle of Wight became a local legend. The sister of a 24-year-old Marine, James Turner, claimed that her brother appeared at her bedroom door one night, dripping wet. Perhaps a dream? Perhaps an apparition. Another such incident comes from the 1930s, when Commander F. Lipscomb of a Royal Navy submarine claims to have had to take evasive action to avoid crashing into a fully rigged ship. But as soon as they were out of harm's way, the boat disappeared, as if made of mist. But the most recent sighting was in October of 1998 by none other than Prince Edward of the British royal family. He was on the Isle of Wight with a television crew filming a piece for the television series Crown and Country. He reported a 3-masted ship off the coast, and the television crew captured the image on film. But in a strange twist, the tape jammed when they tried to play back the footage, destroying the tape and all physical evidence of the ghost. Since then, there have been more sightings of a ship that disappears upon approach. But for the residents of the small British island, the legend has become nothing more than a spooky bedtime story. The potency of the story has been lost, and is now a way to entice tourists, in part because the memories of the men on board is gone with every passing of the relative. But for others, they know better. For them, the apparitions are proof that the men on board are still searching for safe passage home, where they can finally be laid to rest in their own marked grave. This means that, to this day, the HMS Eurydice drifts in the Cape, forlorn but not forgotten. If you've seen the ship yourself, then please share your story in the comments below. If you'd like us to cover more local legends like this, then please leave us a like, and don't forget to share this with a fan of ghost stories. Don't forget to subscribe to be notified of our next video. And as always, sleep tight.